Hello and welcome. I am your guide to a marvelous outdoor adventure. My name is Mike Denny. This program is a beautifully filmed 13-part series on the marvels of the natural history of the northern Blue Mountains in southeastern Washington and northeastern Oregon. In this series, we will be exploring and discovering the vast diversity of life that call the northern Blue Mountains home. We will take visits to many sites in the northern Blues that host some amazing animals and native plants that most folks this day and age simply miss. Join us on this adventure in a part of the world very few even know exists and even fewer have been to. We will start our exciting journey into the secret life of the forest in the northern Blue Mountains. Our exploration will begin in the foothills along the streams and rivers and up into the riparian zones. We will also look into the connections that are influenced by slope and soils. This journey will include many views of insects, blooming native plants, as well as amphibians, reptiles, fishes, birds, and mammals. This presentation is an introduction to a range of mountains that are 100 miles wide and over 400 miles long. The Blue Mountains cover most of northeast Oregon and a large area in southeast Washington state. This massive mountain range has many sub-ranges associated and connected, as well as one moves southwest into Oregon, with names like the Elkhorns, the Aldrich, the Ochiko, along with many millions of acres of public lands and national forests, with names like the Umatilla, the Wallowa Whitman, the Malheur, and the Ochiko. In southeast Washington, these mountains begin near the small hamlet of Pomeroy, Washington, and stretch southwest under other small towns in Oregon like Ukiah, Dale, Mount Vernon, John Day, and Seneca, to name a few. The eastern boundary of the northern Blue Mountains is the spectacular Snake River as it flows north through Hell's Canyon and along the Idaho border. In southeast Washington, rivers and streams are born out of the high country with names like the Tucannon, the Tushie, Asotin, and Pataha. As these mountain ranges jut out into northeastern Oregon, it gives birth to many wonderful rivers and streams. Rivers like the Walla Walla, Umatilla, John Day, Silvies, Grand Ronde, and the Malheur, with streams like Wild Horse, Big Wall, Cottonwood, Mill, and Canyon Creeks. The northern Blues are the ceded and tribal lands of many native peoples that have lived in and hunted this region for many thousands of years. Tribes like the Nez Perce, the Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse. These native peoples utilize and live seasonally throughout this vast mountain range. These tribes still gather and hunt today in these mountains as part of their treaty rights. Join us in the exploration of these ancient lands and all that lives there. Learn about new inhabitants that have arrived in this region of the Blue Mountains in the last 10 years. The red fox, moose, gray wolf, and Virginia possum, along with several other species. Our tour will start by looking at the unique geology of these very interesting mountains. The presence of andesites make the Blue Mountains unique in the Pacific Northwest. The soils and slope aspect determine the plant growth, therefore the birds, insects, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. All life is connected and interdependent in one way or another. Come join on an adventure and an introduction to a vast living land that is so special that you will want to view this outstanding series to its end. The vast area that the northern Blue Mountains cover experience very different weather patterns from season to season depending on elevation and directional aspect. There are many microclimate sites due to the extensive eroded canyons that vary in primary aspect, with most west and south facing slopes thin-soiled, rocky, and treeless. These sites are known as lithosols, or thin, shallow, rocky soils. These sites are subject to being wind-blown throughout the winter months and are often bare of snow by late March, regardless of elevation. The thick timber growth and deep soils are located all on the north and east-facing slopes. These areas collect and retain large amounts of snow over the winter months. On an average year, the snow seldom melts out before mid-May, and if the winter has deposited more than 150 inches of snow, then not until early July. The Northern Blues are a vast eroded plateau that has many hundreds of springs and streams that pour down through the vast systems of drains, washes, and canyons. The northwest corner of the Northern Blue Mountains is the wet end of the whole range, with this area collecting more than 50 inches of precipitation each year. Spring in the Northern Blues is a rich tapestry of many different shades of green spattered with purples, yellows, reds, whites, and blues from the large diversity of blooming plants. Often at lower elevations, the first wildflowers have already emerged by early February on west and south facing slopes, and that is the salt and pepper lomatium, a tiny purple-centered white-petaled flower that is the first plant to offer sustenance to those first early emerging pollinators. Spring starts at low elevation sites, and normally on those west and south facing sun-drenched ridges with buttercups, lomatiums, and prairie stars, along with several native grasses. As the early days of March pass, spring starts its true and persistent creep up the mountain slopes, warming the soils and awakening the earth and all the plants, insects, and hibernating animals that have been in slumber, metamorphing or germinating in preparation for this very season. Spring never stops moving upslope until it reaches the high northern blues in mid-July. This is a season of renewal when plants and animals respond to the sun's warmth and increased hours of daylight and the high production of hormones within, and start to procreate and germinate. This season is a period of time that lasts from late February through to early to mid-July in the high country. In the low elevation sites of the northern blues, April can already be getting dry, and by mid-May, some of the invasive weedgrass species have already gone to seed well ahead of the native grasses. The western and southern ridges and slopes have mostly dried out by the end of May, and the heat index is climbing. Early June can still bring rain and in some years cold weather. These unseasonable cold snaps can have very destructive impacts on pollinators during sensitive periods of their development. The eastern half of the northern blues are in a type of rain shadow and are much drier than the western face, which soaks up and collects a large percentage of the moisture coming off the eastern Pacific Ocean and the Cascades. Summer can arrive early some years when snowfall has been slight and drier weather patterns prevail. During these years, drought conditions occur early, and by late April, warm days are becoming the norm. Long, hot summers dry out the northern blues, and in some years, the flowers wilt in mid-spring. The heat of summer is mostly moderated by nightfall, and this allows all life a respite from living in the long, hot, dry season. The autumn season is long and subtle as it slips into the region in late July, with many songbirds starting migration south, away from the distant approach of winter. The weather is still very warm and dry, clear into early October. Often the rainfalls arrive by mid-September, and in the high country, even an early snow. Wildlife and some native high country plants are still enjoying the short rain of summer at those elevations. Come enjoy the change of seasons that cause all life in the northern blues to adapt and prepare in one way or another for the next shift on this yearly calendar. The sweep of time over the northern blues has created a spectacular range that is complicated in so many ways. It is like a beautiful fabric of relentless life that binds colors, light, topography with a huge diversity of life, with sounds, movements, and the spectacular power of persistence to survive. From the piercing yellow eyes of a great gray owl to the electric sapphire blue of a mountain bluebird and the brilliant reds and greens of a mission-pressed sockeye salmon, this mountain range speaks to a creation that is forever facing change and adapting to meet the next season of life here in the northern blues. Over the last 10 years, there has been a noticeable weather shift. We are seeing drier weather arrive earlier and longer, drier falls. To illustrate this, I would just like to share with you that this winter, a winter of 17-18, we have had warm weather in the middle of January. The last 6 years, we have had warm periods where the snow is gone by early March or the end of February. Snow acts as a water bank in the Blue Mountains, and it is that snow that everyone depends on for water, all the wildlife, the plants, and all the people in the valley. And when that snow is gone or has run off in the same month that it was deposited, we are all losers. With this occurring and air temperatures continually warming and snow falling and then melting out a few days later, there is no water bank. And water is going to become a very critical issue. Wildlife in the northern blues and all of the native plants and trees are becoming stressed earlier in the summer because of the heat that arrives. And over the since 2005, we have experienced several large fires, much larger than we normally got. The Blue Mountains once were termed the Teflon forest because it never burned. It never caught fire because it often had snow that didn't melt out until middle of July, and there was ample water on the ground, and these forests of the northern blues just never burned. That's no longer the truth. Large fires, in 2005, a 52,000 acre fire burned, and the next year, a 108,000 acre fire occurred. And now we're having fires every single summer, way late into the fall. This is an issue that affects all life in this region. Man's use of this vast mountain range has been with a light touch up until the arrival of the 19th century, when the indigenous peoples came face to face with a new people that were on a mission to claim this vast region for themselves. These were a people that were tasked to discover and determine what the condition was of the natural resources, the rivers, and the souls of the tribes. So it was that explorers, trappers, traders, missionaries, soldiers, and dreamers poured into the Blue Mountains after quick wealth to save the tribes and to destroy the tribes, to open up trade routes for commerce, railroads, immigration to the Oregon country. These Blue Mountains would never be the same as roads, fires, logging, mining, hunting, trapping, trading, and farming. Introduction of livestock and settlement forever changed a once stable and predictable landscape. Vanished forever was an ecological balance with no invasive weeds, insects, birds, or mammals. Life in the blues would slowly adapt and life would persist despite the arrival of a whole new philosophy of life and beliefs brought by the people that drug the 19th century into the northern blues.